So around this time last year, I made a video where I predicted all of the books that I thought that I was going to love in 2020. Or speaking in booktube terms, I guess, all the books that I was going to rate 5 stars. I don't really rate my books on this channel, or like in general. I thought what would be fun is if we now revisited that video a year later, now that I've read all the books finally, and figure out, did I love these books? Was I wrong? Or was I kind of correct? Before we get started, I just think it's important to note, I look very different now than I used to last year. So I have nothing to say about that other than the fact that please prepare yourself. I don't know how I'm going to edit this video. I'm a little bit concerned. Hopefully it'll work. We'll see, I guess. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not going to be doing a 2020 like reading goals video because I feel like in a way this challenges me to read the books even more than if I had just made a goal being like, I want to read more historical fiction. I look so different. I want to read more fantasy or whatever. You know, I feel like this will actually like make me feel let me have hair that long. That's my question. You know what this is. The book is Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames. Kings of the Wyld. Okay, I really liked Kings of the Wyld. I thought it was really, really good. Kings of the Wyld is the first book in the Band series, which follows this group of mercenaries. They were very famous and very popular like in their heyday, but now they're kind of in the autumn years of their life. They're just sort of settling down. They want quiet lives, but one of the daughters of one of the members gets into trouble. They kind of have to get the band back together, go on this impossible mission across the land. It's a lot of fun. It's a really good time. All of the characters are really well written, really well fleshed out. I really like all of the character dynamics. It's very believable. They're just like, I don't know, they've got such a solid friendship. It's really great. This book has a really memorable villain as well. Like I still remember the villain. I thought he was great. Really just a lot of fun. I really like the world that Nicholas Eames made as well. It's just, I don't know, kind of generic medieval fantasy, but at the same time, there's a lot of little things that make it stand out. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a lot of fun. I was right. Correct. I loved Kings of the Wyld. Becoming Kirrali Lewis by Jane Harrison. Becoming Kirrali Lewis by Jane Harrison. That was a good one as well. I loved Becoming Kirrali Lewis. It's set in 1985. It's about this young Indigenous Australian woman named Kirrali Lewis. She was adopted by a white family when she was little. And she's now going to university in Sydney. She's going to study law. And it's kind of about her starting to study law at Sydney, meeting some new people, discovering that there might be a little bit more to her Indigenous Australian identity and heritage than she initially realised. It's also about her birth mother and her reconnecting with her birth mother, so it flashes back to her birth mother in the 1960s as well. It's a good time. I loved it. I thought it was great. I really liked all of the Indigenous Australian literature that I read last year. It was all really good. Yeah, and Becoming Kirrali Lewis it was great. I loved it. It was so good. Nothing else to say. It was great. I'm pretty sure you've never heard of this book, and that is Watchtower by Elizabeth A. Lynn. Oh, Watchtower. Okay, I've actually got that here. So, Watchtower by Elizabeth A. Lynn is the first book in the Chronicles of Tornor trilogy. Elizabeth A. Lynn is kind of a not very popular lesbian fantasy author from the 70s and 80s. I really liked this. I thought it was so good. Watchtower is about this keep called Tornor Keep, and it gets taken over by Cole Istor, who's this raider from the north. This follows Reich and Errol. Errol's the prince. Reich is kind of, I think he was a knight, but he's now sort of like a servant sort of kind of character under Cole Istor, and it's about them fleeing the keep, trying to get this group of people to come back with them to retake Tornor Keep, if that makes sense. I don't know if I described that very well. Anyway, I really, really enjoyed this book. This focuses a lot, Elizabeth A. Lynn seems to focus a lot less on like fantasy battles and epic battles and that sort of thing, as opposed to themes and character moments and just stuff about like the general world, if that makes sense. So the conflict is less in the actual battles and more in like conflict of, I don't know, principles and themes and just ideas. I think it's cool. It's a really short read. It's a quick read. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Really not what I was expecting, but I loved it. It was so good. I've also got the rest of the trilogy here, so I'm going to read that, and if they're anything like Watchtower, I'm sure I'll love those as well, you know? At this point, I really like Elizabeth A. Lynn. I think she's great, and I really want to read, like, everything that she's written. So, yeah. I have a feeling I'm going to love it just for the fact that it's just so obscure. And it's exciting to me, you know? That's another reason I like it. It is very obscure. I like reading obscure things. The Fifth Elephant by Terry Pratchett. Oh, The Fifth Elephant. Yes. I loved The Fifth Elephant. It was so good. The Fifth Elephant was so good. The Fifth Elephant is a Discworld novel. It's the 5th book in the City Watch sub-series of Discworld. That doesn't mean anything to people who don't read Discworld. and that's fine. I'm not going to explain it. I have a whole video about, you know, Discworld, if you want to go watch that. That'll be up there somewhere. But yeah, The Fifth Elephant was so good. We're following, I don't even remember, I can't even describe to you what The Fifth Elephant was about, because I read it like back last February. It was such a long time ago. But it was just great. It was such a good time. We've got vampires in this book, werewolves, dwarves, just so we go outside Ankh-Morpork with the City Watch characters for like the first time ever, and it was just great. It was everything I wanted. All of the dynamics between the characters are so good. Angwa particularly is one of my favorite characters in this book. That and Cheery Littlebottom. I love Cheery Littlebottom so much. She's like my favorite Discworld character. Well, is she? I don't know. That's a good question. Anyway, she was great in this book as well. It was just so much fun. Very different City Watch book as well, which I think was what made me like it even more, is that, you know, Men-at-Arms, Feet of Clay, and Jingo, they all seemed a little bit kind of similar in tone, at least. And I really, really liked The Fifth Elephant. I thought it was so much fun. This is the first book that takes place pretty much, like, not at Ankh-Morpork at all. Like, Jingo, we're still kind of in Ankh-Morpork, but with The Fifth Elephant, everyone goes away, and it's just so much fun. I loved the road trip travel element of it as well. It's just, I don't know, I liked it. It was so good. I loved it. It was great. This book is The Seep by Chana Porter. I first heard about this book on Goodreads. So I could have made this video back in like October, because that was when I read the last book on this list. But the reason I put it off for such a long time is because I don't really want to talk about The Seep. But I guess we have to, I guess. What is there to say about The Seep? I liked it. It was good. It was a good book. You know, this is a science fiction novel that's set after this like really soft alien invasion. This entity called the Seep comes to Earth, basically decimates late stage capitalism. You can alter literally anything about anything. So there are people getting like bodily modifications like antlers and like 2 extra arms, or there are people who decide that they want to just live forever, so they do. That sounds like a really interesting premise, doesn't it? It sounds like such an interesting premise. Like so many interesting stories could come out of that. And this, The Seep, is an exploration of grief, which is good. You know, it's good for what it is, but I don't think that this book I don't think the story that gets told in this book necessarily needed the premise, if that makes sense. Like, it's an exploration of grief, but there's nothing in that exploration of grief that specifically requires the Seep. You know? That doesn't make sense. And I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense to people who've read the book, but there's nothing, I didn't find that there was anything about this exploration of grief that could have not been done in a book that wasn't a science fiction novel, you know? Like, there is stuff that's done in here that could just be part of like a dream sequence or something, you know, in any other novel. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. When I was reading this, I kept like picking up on little things about this world and being like, that's so interesting. I would love to, you know, hear more about that. And then we'd spend like a page on it, and then nothing would get said of it again. And I was like, wow, cool, okay. You know, like there's this character at the end who like uses the Seep to switch between genders, and that's such a cool idea. And I would love to see that explored more, but we don't. It doesn't. You know, we spend time grieving. So I was going to talk non-spoilers, but I guess I'll spoil this book. So the reason that we're grieving is because the main character's partner decides that she wants to become a baby again, which is I guess that is integral to the Seep. But there's nothing that's done post-decision to become a baby that requires the Seep. It's as though their partner has just died, and nothing gets done with that ever again. But the partner's not dead. She's a baby in another country. And then we spend the rest of the novel focusing on this child. And I understand the connection there, like, oh, it's about Trina, you know, reconnecting with people. But I just think, like, with a premise like this, why doesn't Trina take care of the baby or something? There are so many things that you could do with a premise like this when exploring grief in a post-capitalist world that doesn't get done. Also, this book has a villain. I don't think this book needed a villain, but it gets given one, and I don't really think it was necessary. I'm just rambling at this point. It comes across like I didn't like The Seep. I really liked The Seep for what it was. I just thought it was going to be a lot more than what it was. Because at the end as well, like in the author's note or the acknowledgements or whatever is at the end of this book, the author talks about how it was originally like a multi-perspective story with like lots of different stories in there. And that makes so much more sense because there are a bunch of friends at the start and then they just appear randomly at the end again. And it's like, well, what, where did these people go in the interim? I think this story would make much more sense if it was part of like a much larger story that explored more facets of the Seep and more facets of this premise. Because I like the story that gets told here, but I don't think the premise was used to its full potential, if that makes sense. I don't know. I didn't not like The Seep. This is a good book, but I just don't think it used its premise to its full potential. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say on that. I think, I don't know. That's just me. That's just me. Also, bear in mind, I read that book in like October or August or something, so maybe I don't remember it very well. But that's just my opinion, okay? England has a new novel coming out like next week, and it's Spellhacker. Oh, and I'm just so... Spellhacker by M.K. England. Okay, this is a science fantasy novel that's kind of like a heist sort of story. Basically, there's this company that hoarding magic as a resource, and we follow our protagonist Diz and a bunch of her friends, and they're criminals, and they're siphoning the magic from this company and distributing it like amongst the people for cheaper and whatever. And basically, Diz and her friends get tied up in this conspiracy, and it's a big thing, and it's a lot of fun. I really liked it. Did I love it? I think Spellhacker could have been a lot longer. I think there were kind of things missing from Spellhacker. Just scenes and explanations on the magic, that sort of thing. One thing that I think MK England does really well is like the dynamics and the bonds between their characters. I think they're really good with like creating really likable young adult characters. I really like MK England's characters. I think they're great. There was just some things about the plot that kind of held it back for me. You know, I liked it. I didn't love it, but it was good. I wouldn't not recommend it, you know? The next one is kind of a bit of a gamble. And that's Euphoria Kids by Alison Evans. I was wrong. This was not a gamble. I loved Euphoria Kids. It was so good. Euphoria Kids is by Alison Evans. They are a non-binary Australian author from Melbourne. They're fantastic. I love them. Euphoria Kids was great. It was so good. I've rambled so much about Euphoria Kids in like my previous videos. It's just so good. So we're following 3 queer kids in a rural Australian town. This book has a lot of like witchy Studio Ghibli vibes. It's great. It's a real good time. This is kind of like if Studio Ghibli did like a trans coming of age story about 3 young kids, you know? I don't know if that is a good way of describing it, but I really liked it. I thought it was great. I'm not really going to go into like the plot or anything because it's a real short book, but it's a really good time. I loved it. I thought it was just so good. But highly, highly recommend Euphoria Kids. Not at all a gamble. It's great. Yes, I loved it. It was so good. I was right. I was correct. I was right about something. Last book on this list is Heartstopper Volume 3. And Heartstopper by Oseman Volume 3. Oh, well, this, you know, 5 stars. So good. When is Heartstopper not amazing? I liked this volume because it delves more into, I think it's Charlie's, like, eating disorder and that sort of thing. Not really, but it gets, like, mentioned, and I think that's an interesting plot that, you know, could develop in the future. I think that's an interesting route for Alice Oseman to, like, take it. I think that's, I don't know, I like it. I think it's interesting. Other than that, you know, like, it's just, you know, wholesome Heartstopper times. It's great. I love it. I thought it was so good. I'm excited for Volume 4, which is coming out this year at some point. I don't know when, at some point. I think that's the last book. Let me know, what you thought of my thoughts. I don't know how to end this video. Do you want me to do another 5-star predictions video? Because I kind of want to. I also want to do a video about like all the books that I loved that I didn't predict that I would love, because I think that's interesting as well. I don't know. Just let me know. Let me know. Just let me know, you know? Thank you so much for sticking around until the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again next week with a new one. Bye!